No mustache today. Good morning. And we are live. We are on air. Good morning, Timothy.
Good
And
morning.
everybody who is waiting for us to start. I can see that Hiroaki is on YouTube. Good morning, Hiroaki. And thank you very much for waking up so early this Sunday morning to celebrate the 208th episode or the fourth anniversary since the start of this podcast. This has been the only podcast in English that has run so long for, on Japanese politics here in Japan, and I have only Timothy to thank about that. So, thank you, Timothy, and congratulations.
Maya, did you already start the show without the promo? Without the video?
I did.
Oh
Oh
my
no.
gosh.
Oh no, let's go to the video.
Oh my gosh. I'm sitting here wondering, who is she talking to? We haven't even started yet. I haven't done my dance or anything. It takes 4 years for you to make this kind of catastrophic mistake.
Right. Shall we go back to the video then?
I guess we just roll with it anyway.
Okay. Here
Happy
we go.
anniversary, Maya.
To you too, Timothy.
Woo-hoo!
Okay, it's over to you for a celebratory.
Celebratory.
That word, yes,
Yes.
that word.
Thank you very much, Maya. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our 208th episode. That means 4 years running consecutively every Sunday under threat of death or violence, or maybe starting the video out of sequence. But Maya, thank you very much for initiating this program 4 years ago. And we have been here every goddamn Sunday giving this audience of Japan Hands an update on a weekly update on what's going on in Japanese politics. Thank you so much, Maya.
And thank you, Timothy. Now it's a word. Do you have that thing in your hands that you... Yes, that one. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Woo! Okay, so that's all for... Yes. Okay.
Anyway.
Oh, it smells. I was not
So,
aware of this.
yes,
Yes.
for those of you that are in the audience now, if you could just hit like or congratulations or something, give us some kind.
Timothy, I lost you. Oh, no.
Really terrifically, and maybe go on for another, 4 years. What do you think, Maya?
Well, at least 4, maybe more.
Maya's frozen. Wow. And
You
quiet.
are frozen.
That's a
Yes.
surprise.
Okay, at least 4, maybe more.
Okay.
That's what I want to say.
Well,
Okay,
there you
now,
go.
yes.
I lost you briefly.
Sorry for that. Yes, thank you for the whatever words, for clicking like and dislike and leaving a comment. Okay, Timothy, I think that today we've got kind of unstable connection. So, yes.
It just matches the presenter.
Yes, and the weather as well. It's a rainy morning here in Tokyo. So, all right, let's go into the first, the brief introduction by you, and then move on.
Okay, thank you very much, Maya. As you can tell, everybody, I'm not broadcasting from Katsuyama or from the good ship Grimm's. I am here in my home office. It is too cold to go out near the water this weekend. There were some snow flurries, and so I'm just sticking close to home and celebrating this really tremendous achievement of 4 years together. And it was because of you, because of your encouragement and your endorsement and your participating with us. So let me tell you what's going on these last maybe 8 days, because things happened Saturday of last week that I wasn't able to report on. It wasn't available news yet, but over the last 8 days and what's going on and what is likely to go on. So let me give you just a brief tidbit of the snippets of what's going on. I'll pass it back over to Maya, and then we can get back into the beef of it. The Budget Committee finally began deliberations on Friday. They were supposed to meet on Wednesday. There was a huge kerfuffle because the opposition parties, the Constitutional Democratic Party, insisted that the LDP approve their insistence that the accountant for the LDP testify in front of the committee. So the budget committee has broad testimonial powers. They can ask for and seek testimony of any Diet member, including the prime minister, and also private citizens. So they got the agreement by the LDP that they would do their utmost to get the accountant, who is, I think he's 72 years old, to come into the budget committee to testify on the 10th of February. He is a private citizen, so he can refuse if he wants to, and likely he will refuse, which will just again begin another round of just controversy. So the whole cabinet was open for questioning on Friday finally, but only 2 LDP questioners came in. One was for the LDP, representing the LDP, to ask the prime minister about this budget you submitted. You submitted it before the close of the year. We've been studying it, and now is the first opportunity for the budget committee to examine it. And we have until March 2nd to pass it. So we've got maybe 30 days or so to deliberate this in the lower house. And here are our questions. What are you going to do about the school lunches? What are you going to do about foreign affairs? What are you going to do about a visit to the White House? All of these things. So 2 questioners came from the LDP questioning the prime minister, though he is from the LDP, to probably explain or to extrapolate on some of the issues. And then from the Constitutional Democratic Party, remember the committee is chaired by a member of the Constitutional Democratic Party. This is the first time in 30 years that the LDP has not had the ability to just kind of railroad things through. So let me see. The questions from the Diet will continue until the 5th about the national budget, and then the committee moves on from a ministry by ministry examination. The lower house has to pass the budget by March 2nd. They pass it to the upper house. Constitutionally, the upper house has to have 30 days to review the budget and then vote on it. They could vote on it earlier, but probably it will take up the entire 30 days. Then it is either passed if the upper house passes it, or if the upper house does not pass it, it goes back down to the lower house, assuming the lower house passed it and initiated it to the upper house by March 2nd. And then it becomes law, and then they move on into the second phase of this regular Diet session on April 1st. Given just the meeting of the budget committee this last week, it was delayed by almost 2 days. And really the trench warfare hasn't quite started. And there's a lot in store for that. So we expect a little bit more of that. The deadlock was broken by agreeing on Thursday that Matsumoto Junichiro, from the former accountant for the LDP, would show up on the 10th, which is 3 days after the prime minister goes to Washington, D.C. That's next Monday. And the voting is, it's kind of weird for the LDP. The budget committee consists of 50 members. The LDP has 21 seats. Komeito has 3 seats. That means the LDP has 24 of 50 seats, not quite 50%. So they have to cajole somebody to join them. That is what the big rub is. And it permeates all of Diet deliberations, particularly in the budget committee. And the budget committee, if there's a deadlock vote, the chairman gets his final say, and he's with the Constitutional Democratic Party. So it doesn't look very good. Nakatani Gen, who is the Minister of Defense, spoke with the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegswish, on Friday. They had about a 45-minute discussion to discuss defense and joint exercises around the Senkaku Islands, which is a flashpoint. It's one of the islands that are contested by Japan, Taiwan, and Korea, in fact. But it is the flashpoint should kinetic action take hold. And so they're talking about moving forward to that, more joint exercises, that sort of thing. Also strengthening the bilateral relationship as the highest priority for Japan's foreign policy and security policy. So the prime minister will visit Washington, D.C. this Friday. So this is a busy week for the prime minister. He's already boning up on it. You remember what happened with the Canadian prime minister when he visited with Donald Trump, had dinner with him, and he resigned a couple of days later. I don't mean to suggest that that's going to happen to the prime minister, but it is totally in flux now. And this prime minister going to Washington, D.C. on a little bit of an accelerated schedule with a big agenda, with a lot of things to do. He's not going to play golf with him. He's not going to be chummy with him. It's going to be kind of a meet and greet. He'll be, attended with his foreign minister and his finance minister. It'll be a full court press, but it's only one day. He's got to fly in, have his meeting on the 7th, which would be Friday, and then fly back to Tokyo and continue with these diet deliberations. So Mr. Ishiba's speech on Friday at the Tokyo Global Dialogue focused on, among all things, the 80th anniversary of the end of the war. This really was quizzical and really made a lot of people, a lot of observers, wonder what he is thinking about it. It was 80 years, but why is he saying we need to define why the war happened, who did it, why it didn't stop earlier, and all of these things, and make some sort of a ceremony for the 80th anniversary when we've got all these other things going on. And if that's his message at the global dialogue, it's likely to be part of his message when he meets with Trump. So many people are scratching their heads wondering, Mr. Prime Minister, are you focusing on the right things? So in a surprise development, Mr. Motegi, who used to be the Secretary General of the LDP, and then we had Mr. Suga resign, Mr. Kishida resigned, and he is not, in fact, his faction was one of the factions that disbanded as a consequence of the money scandal. He's had a dinner meeting earlier this week just for members, and the number of people that showed up, diet members showed up, was what, 60? 70 members showed up. His faction, because we're not really, the only faction that actually exists on paper is the ASO faction with 32 registered members. Mr. Motegi's faction had 26 members, and for 70 people to show up for a dinner with him, it's not saying I'm having this dinner meeting with you. It's a private dinner meeting, 70 people. Doesn't mean I'm joining your faction, but everybody sees it. Everybody knows who's going to this dinner. It does raise the prospect that there's this coalition of forces beginning, not just with Mr. Motegi. Mr. Motegi is somewhat of a surprise, but with Mr. Kishida, with Mr. Suga, with other people who are potential contenders or kingmakers for a next round. And with all of the other things that are going on, with Mr. Ishiba traveling to Washington, D.C., with the budget committee hearings, with the March 2nd deadline that the LDP must pass, the lower house must pass it up to the upper house. And if they don't, there could be a call for no confidence. So it's really a lot in flux. And so it's something very curious to watch, and we'll be reporting on that as it develops. But this is supposed to be just a tidbit. Komeito is making noises that it's really not that satisfied or happy with the LDP. This has been growing. It's been quiet, but it's beginning to break the surface now. The chief of Komeito, Mr. Saito, criticized the LDP for lack of energy devoted for regaining public trust just recently, and he wants Komeito to return to the clean government core principles. So Komeito is translated as the clean government party. And the fact that Komeito translated as the clean government party. Thank you, Maya. So that's your message to tell me hurry up and get through this part. So that means that if the Komeito LDP coalition disappears, and it's kind of up in the air if it would, that means that this whole ball of wax is going to break down, and there's going to be a refinement of the political alignment here in Japan, and that could happen sooner rather than later. We've got elections probably for the lower house around June 20th, somewhere around there. So a lot can happen between here and there, but a lot can happen just in the next 2 weeks as well. I'm going to keep my eye on it. Trump expanded tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada. You probably heard about that, but this causes ripples throughout the entire supply chain that Japan is critically involved in. So Japan is furiously having negotiations with its trading partners about the impact of supplying or supplementing the goods and services, avocados coming from Mexico and oil and lumber coming from Canada. It's huge. 10% tariff on China. I think those are going to be implemented immediately. So it's going to have a big impact on the economy and on the various stances that the countries take, and particularly the talking points of the Prime Minister when he meets with President Trump on Friday of this week. Let me kick it back to you, Maya, and then get into some of the more salient details.
Thank you very much for this. Oh, yes, okay. I am not muted. Nice. You always manage to catch me in this when I mute myself, but okay, yes, thank you very much. Sorry, I need to say a word of thank you to our first sponsor, and that is Kanchu or Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku, James Howell as well. You already know him from LinkedIn if you're there, or if you have listened to any of our previous podcasts, you already know who he is. But I want to say that if you have any projects in mind, involving buying or selling real estate in Yokohama, or real estate investment or property management, James is your person. So I encourage you to connect with him. You will also find his contact details in the description of the video on YouTube. So james@kanachu.com, you can email him there, and do not hesitate to do that. He speaks English and Japanese, and his colleagues speak Japanese as well. So either way, you are not going to have any problems in terms of linguistics. Okay, Timothy, now it's back to you.
Thank you very much, Maya. So we got started on a little bit of the left foot here. We didn't cover some of the things that we normally cover before we jump in, but let me backtrack just a tiny bit here. The yen closed out on Friday at $155.2 to the yen. It has strengthened. Last week at this time, it was 156. So it's a little bit weaker. It's strengthening just a tiny bit. That's good news for the Bank of Japan, for the economy of Japan. But as you know, the cost of goods, the deflation of workers' salaries in real terms has increased on pace. And so the Bank of Japan and the Prime Minister are concerned about that. I'll touch on that a little bit later. On February 6th, which is this Thursday, if you are in Tokyo and you like this kind of discussion that we're having, Dan Harada is having a breakfast at the capital of Tokyo. He's been doing this for about 30 years. If you're interested, either contact me or Maya, or directly to Dan Harada, Nagatacho Forum, and participate in his monthly briefing on what's going on in Japanese politics. It is terrifically insightful. He belongs to the LDP. He is a naturalized Japanese citizen and gives us the straight poop on what's happening there. And it's very valuable and timely. On February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day, Maya, we are having a briefing on Japanese politics and lobbying and how that impacts business, and how you can get involved in it, or how you should be involved in it if you're running a business here in Japan.
Yes, that will be on the 13th of February. And if I may say something, actually, the plan is to talk more about how lobbying and advocacy actually impacts business in Japan, and why it is important for your company to be aware of that, and what you can do about it as well. Politics might be there, but not as much as it is here on this briefing.
That's
as
right.
well. We start on the 5th, at 1700, that is 5 p.m. in the afternoon, and it is an in-person briefing, so the seats are limited. And if you're curious, if you want to attend, please contact me or contact Timothy Langley about this, or you can also find information about this briefing online at the account of Langley Squire on LinkedIn. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you there, because well, with the change of politics, I mean internationally, also domestically, we live in a very fluid time, and it is very important for everybody to know what they can do to become more strategic, or to protect their business before it is actually late for doing that. Timothy,
Great.
back to you.
Thank you very much, Maya. So this is just another example of how we try to respond to the audience concerns and issues. A lot is going on in Japanese politics, and with the regulations, with the tariffs, the trip to Washington, D.C. So lobbying has become a little bit more important to a lot of people, or at least they're curious about it. So as a consequence of that, we're offering this briefing on Thursday, February 13th. Moving on, for the last 30 years, the LDP didn't have to negotiate with the opposition parties to pass the national budget. Last year, the chair of the budget committee is this year's LDP policy affairs chief. So he, let me see. Last year, he rammed through the LDP budget in March of 2024 for the 2025 budget. And opposing him was the current budget chairman, Mr. Azumi, and Mr. Onodera, who was the LDP budget committee chair last year, who just kind of stuck his finger in the face of everybody else and rammed through the budget, complained to Mr. Azumi, it's a completely switch of fortunes here, that he was certainly hopeful that the chairman didn't allow the budget committee to vote to bring the LDP accountant into the budget committee. This is unusual, Mr. Chairman. LDP rules, or I mean, budget committee rules insist that it must be unanimous to bring a private party in to testify, and we hold 21 of the seats. And Komeito, are you going to vote with us? And Komeito said no. So the vote was not unanimous, but the LDP got a lot of egg on their face, and as a consequence, they had to agree that the accountant would be required to testify, but the committee doesn't have a kind of enforcement mechanism, so he will more likely decline. The promise was that the LDP would encourage him to show up on February 10. That's probably not going to happen. If he did show up, there's more dirt and egg on the face for the LDP, obviously, so the LDP just doesn't want that to happen, but they are in a big conundrum here. The budget must pass the lower house by March 2nd, as I mentioned earlier, to give the upper house 30 days to pass it. And it goes from the lower house to the upper house. And if it passes the lower, it has to pass the lower house in order to go to the upper house. But if it doesn't go, if it goes from the lower house to the upper house and the upper house says, no, we don't like it, for the budget, it goes back down to the lower house, they vote again, and then it becomes law. So the lower house gets 2 bites of the apple. So that's why all of the discussion, all of the focus here is on the lower house and on the lower house budget committee. And the lower house budget committee, once again, is chaired by the Constitutional Democratic Party individual. This hasn't happened in 30 years. So indicative of the difficulties that the LDP and the current administration is going to have is just having this first meeting. The LDP offered the budget before the close of the year. People have been looking at it. They questioned the prime minister on Monday. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, they were supposed to be discussing individual parts of it. They had a breakdown in negotiations. And finally, the LDP said, okay, we'll attempt to invite the accountant on February 10th. And then they had their meeting yesterday or on Friday. So there is movement that's going on there, but it's they have precious little time. Today is the 2nd of February, by the way. Welcome for everyone finishing and surviving through January. But today is February 2nd. By March 2nd, in 28 days, they have to pass this budget. This is a real difficulty for them. There are 21 members of the LDP in the committee. Komeito is not voting with the LDP on this issue. So I said earlier in the opening that there seems to be serious fractures in the LDP-Komeito relationship. And this is one of the indicators. A second indicator is that the LDP lost, there are 28 election districts in Tokyo proper for the lower house. Tokyo 21 is held by a good friend of mine, Odawara Kiyoshi, and he lost in the last election, and it was taken over by an independent. And Komeito has an agreement with the LDP that it won't put a Komeito person against an LDP candidate in order to kind of spread it out. They're in a coalition. That has been going on for 21 years, and the Komeito just announced this last week that they will run a candidate in Tokyo 21. Mr. Odawada is also going to run. He's an LDP candidate to regain his seat. So this is pretty serious. It shows you that the Komeito is worried about their standing inside the Diet with the number of seats that they have, and also the reluctance of the LDP to really pony up and admit the faults and the failures that they had in this money scandal that started maybe 20 years ago, and also it seems to be filtering out not only to the Tokyo metropolitan government but to Hyogo and to other LDP districts as well. So this could be a real disaster for the LDP, and that's why people are really watching it. That's why Dan Harada's breakfast briefing on Thursday, it's always packed, it's a full room, and that's why our audience is growing by leaps and bounds as well, and I appreciate that. I know it's not because of me, maybe because of Maya, but it's also because of what's going on in Japanese politics, and people are just really curious about that. So last Sunday's election, we reported on this show, there were 4 local elections that were going on. There were 2 governorships going up. There was 1 mayor, and then there was 1 prefectural assembly. And the reason why we mentioned those is because it's what happens in the regions is a bellwether for what's going to happen nationally. And it gives you kind of a temperature read of how the public is feeling. It wasn't as drastic as people who are against the LDP had hoped, but in Kita-Kyushu, they had an assembly for the 57 seats that are available in the Kita-Kyushu assembly. There were 18 incumbents from the LDP. There are now 15. So they lost 3 individuals there. Also of kind of great interest is that the voter turnout was only 17%. So it could be that the population is getting a little bit tired of the shenanigans that are going on in politics, and they're just not participating. It could be that, but on the other hand, Okinawa had had a election for a local governor in Ginowan. Ginowan is one of the cities where the capital city is, but it's also where the biggest discussion of moving the Marines from one place into another place has been occurring, from Futema to Henoko, and the value of having an LDP person as mayor of that city is paramount, because the governor of Okinawa is against it, and many of the assembly is against it as well. So the fact that the 60-year-old candidate, Mr. Sakima, won, he's backed by the LDP and Komeito, is pretty important to point out. He was the mayor from 2012 until 2018. He was defeated by Mr. Matsugawa, who just suddenly died while in office. They had to have a by-election, and he came up. The voter turnout there was 53%, down 10% from the last election when Mr. Matsugawa defeated Mr. Sakuma. So there's a lot going on there. In Gifu and in Yamagata, there were governorship races. The governor won the 5th term in Yamagata, a 73-year-old incumbent, the fifth time, the first woman to win 5 terms as a governor in Japanese history, Miss Yoshimura Meiko. She was contended by an 84-year-old candidate who was supported by who was she supported by? She wasn't supported by the LDP. The winner was supported by the LDP, the Constitutional Democratic Party, the Democratic Party for the People, and Komeito. So that was a pretty significant win there. In Gifu, 60-year-old Eisaku Yoshihide was an independent elected for governor. He was supported by the LDP, the Constitutional Democratic Party, the Democratic Party for the People, and Komeito. And he defeated a 64-year-old candidate who was independent but supported by the Communist Party. Foreign workers in Japan continue to increase. This is pretty surprising, but not unexpected. Another record high for the 12th consecutive year of foreign workers in Japan. 2,300,000 workers to October, year on year. That's a 12.4 increase from 2024. The Vietnamese were the top number of not immigrants, but workers who came in, perhaps immigrants, maybe short-term visas or trainees. They consisted of 10% of the total. The Chinese were up 2.7% from the year earlier. Myanmar and Indonesia, they increased 61% and 39% respectively from the year earlier. So a lot of people from Myanmar and Indonesia are increasing their numbers working here. Most of them are going into manufacturing. More than 26% of the entire total of this 2.3 million workers is in manufacturing, and manufacturing share of the foreign workers is 8.3% of the total. So that's kind of obvious. You can see that from news reports as well, that a lot of the heavy equipment and a lot of the manufacturing is done. You can just see from the television reports. You remember we talked about the Fuji television scandal last week and how that was really devastating the communications giant here in Japan. They focus a lot on music and entertainment, obviously, advertising. Over the last week since the scandal broke, they have lost more than 23 billion in revenue as a consequence of this scandal. The scandal is one of the fellows, one of the members of SMAP. SMAP disbanded many years ago, and one of the members, Mr. Nakai, became very popular as a talk show host and selling products, selling beer, being in lots of kinds of shows sponsored by and promoted by Fuji Television. And he was accused by a female employee or an actress of inappropriate activity or inappropriate advances. Quietly, he paid her off 90 million yen, which is about a little bit more than $500,000, to keep her quiet. That story broke. People wanted to know, was it from his pocket? Was it from Fuji Television? How was this little meeting between the girl and Mr. Nakai facilitated? And why is it that these guys who work in television and have such, and it's not just the entertainment industry, but it's also powerful figures in the boardrooms, how come they get away with so much of this stuff and it never reaches the light of day? And there's a lot of controversy there. So it's really a kind of a reflection on the Me Too phase, which is still going somewhat strong. So on January 17th, Fuji Television held a press conference to explain it, but they didn't do a very good job. They were evasive. They weren't very conciliatory. They didn't really explain much. And then sponsors started pulling out. They had a press conference just this week, I think on Monday. It went for 10 and a half hours, one of the longest press conferences held. It went until 2 o'clock in the morning. So they opened the press conference up to anybody who wanted to come in, people who were having digital podcasts, people who were working for major news outlets, that sort of thing. And they answered the questions. The executives of Fuji Television sat there stoically. They sat there for almost 10 hours, one 15-minute break in between. And eventually people just left the building and the press conference ended. But that generated a lot of respect and admiration for the executives on taking it on the chin. So who knows what's going to happen, but most of the executives have retired. Mr. Nakai has retired from the entertainment industry. His career is finished. And a final report, they promise, will be expected at the end of March. That's a long way away, but it does look like Fuji, it could be up for not likely bankruptcy. Somebody will swoop in and pick it up, and it'll be under new management. But that's a huge deal. that's happening in the Japanese political and economic and social culture right now, and it's important for us to point that out. The inflation numbers are in for January, even though it's February 2. They were released yesterday or on Friday. Consumer prices jumped 2.5% from last January. This is the fastest pace since February of 2024. This is pretty shocking. Since January 2024, throughout these 12 months, this 2.5 increase was led by the overall 3.4% pace in perishable foods, in green groceries, in vegetables, that sort of thing. So it really puts a little bit of the Bank of Japan on their back foot, because they just increased the amount of lending 2 weeks ago, as we reported here, when the Bank of Japan Governor Ueda made a slight change to the lending, because when Trump became president, there was no backlash. The yen was going a little bit stronger, and he felt a little bit of encouragement to begin to increase that, even though tapping down the inflation rate is proving to be difficult. He has promoted now that the inflation rate, although the target is 2%, it's been 2% even in the previous administration of the Bank of Japan. It hasn't been reached in 30 months. And the inflation rate is predicted now to be for 2025 more than 2.5%, and for 2026 a little bit less, maybe 2.3%, but nowhere close to 2.0%. So the job openings, as a consequence of that, as we know, the declining population and birth rate of Japan really impacts the job market as well. We all feel it. The labor market continues to be tight. The jobless rate, the unemployment rate, is 2.4%, and there are 125 job openings for every 100 applicants. So applicants for jobs in Japan have their pick. They can pick from 1 or 2 or 3 options, and if you're just getting out of college or you want to change jobs, that market is very tight. So the labor market and the spring offensive for raising wages is going to be very furious this year. And when you overlay that on what's going on in politics, the prime minister is really under a very difficult set of circumstances. Last week's borrowing costs were up to the highest since 2008. And the price of rice, you might have not been following this, but the price of rice has been rising precipitously. They believe that it might be because there's some hoarding that's going on. Tremendous lack of rice, even though the production was on par with normal years. And the subsidies are ending for energy costs that the government has given. It was included in the supplemental budget to end to supplement the rising energy costs, but that ends on April 1st. So it's going to tick up the cost of living as well. And in Tokyo, the price of rice rose almost 73% from June of 2024, and fresh foods are up 24%. So in a 1 year period, that is a very huge jump. North Korea fired 2 missiles Saturday, so that happened 8 days ago. We weren't too aware of it. I think they kept it quiet, or they were waiting for confirmation. 2 missiles were launched underwater for a surface trajectory. So this is pretty interesting, a pretty interesting development. It indicates that North Korea's submarine technology is increasing in line with its missile technology. So 2 cruise missiles were fired. They flew for 2 hours. They flew for more than 1,500 kilometers. They went up and they did a figure 8. They flew for 2 hours and then splashed down in a targeted area, so reported. But this is a huge deal for Japan, for South Korea, for the rest of this this whole alliance of partners against Japan, that are against Japan and the United States, Korea, Russia, and China. And so this kinetic action that is being threatened, I think we can get into it in the Q&A period, but Donald Trump has his plate full of trying to avoid this kind of controversy during his presidency. And I think you're going to see a lot of action there. But much will be told when the prime minister comes back, when the reports are how his meeting went with Donald Trump. But maybe I should push that off to the Q&A. I don't want to go too long, but once again, Maya, thank you very much, and congratulations on 4 years of Japanese Politics One-on-One. I love it when you're on mute.
Yes, I'm getting confused moving between different platforms when I'm mute, when I'm not, and so on. But thank you for your consistency. Thank you for the persistence. And, well, being here every Sunday morning with the latest in Japanese politics. I also want to share this anniversary with somebody who has been listening to us actually for quite a while. Patricia Yarrow just shared that her project Inform Asia is also on its fourth year. So Patricia, congratulations on that.
Congratulations.
And, yes, it's wonderful to actually celebrate together. I don't know when exactly you will mark your anniversary, but we'll be happy to be there with you as well. So great, really wonderful to know that. And Timothy, before we continue in the questions and answers, I once again want to say thank you to our other sponsor, this time Houze Inc. You can find them on LinkedIn, I believe, through James Howell and Hana Roshizawa Howell, but also online at www.houze.co.jp. So this is a company that offers custom home design and construction. They also do commercial building construction. If you are thinking about any such project, we do encourage you to connect with them. You see the email is here, but you can also talk with James Howell and Hana Roshizawa Howell on LinkedIn. So thank you very much for this sponsorship to Houze. Now we continue with questions and answers from the audience. And yes, Patricia, June 2025. Okay, we'll be there for you. And until then, let's continue. I see that Inform Asia has been very successful there as well. If you want to share information with us, you can do that probably later. So now we move into the Q&A, and we'll go into some observations and comments as well.
Okay.
On LinkedIn first. Oh, just let me get there. Okay. Yes, please forgive me. It looks like. Okay. Yes. A moment of silence. All right. So here we go, and then we've got a couple of comments here. Once again about the scandal, which is the political fund scandal that basically, if the country does not, the state of Japan does not finance the political parties, there shouldn't be a problem then for politicians to offer, let's say, study groups and study sessions for anybody who wants to know more about politics. And there shouldn't be any problem for politicians to charge for those study sessions. And then this is one of the comments here on LinkedIn, but we also need to mention that of course, we have talked about this before, that there shouldn't be a problem about that. But at the same time, this scandal was not so much about the funds that were generated and distributed among the members of the LDP, some members of the LDP, but it was about those members not paying tax, right? So I think that's basically why the media picked up the whole thing, and why the public was unhappy with the development of this and the revelations about the funds, the political funds. Yes, Timothy, would you like to add anything to this, or shall we continue with?
I don't have anything to add. That's good flavor to contribute.
Okay, so one of the questions we've got on LinkedIn is, the LDP appears not to have any clear idea about how to end the seemingly endless alleged kickback scandal.
Yeah.
Is that a strategy by certain LDP leaders to keep the issue festering to checkmate other leaders, especially of the former Abe faction? Perhaps the new budget committee chair, belonging to the CDPJ, also wants the scandal to fester to cause
Yeah.
maximum embarrassment to the LDP in the run-up to the summer election. So,
Yeah, absolutely. The prime minister and the LDP wanted this issue dead and buried when we closed out the year. That was part of why we went through the supplemental budget negotiations and some of the concessions that were given by the LDP and by the prime minister to tap this thing down, but it didn't. It just kind of continued to inflame. He wasn't able to capture any 11 extra votes, either from LDP, from Komeito, not Komeito, from the Constitutional Democratic Party, from the Democratic People's Party, or from Ishin. Just it got worse, actually, and it's going to continue to get worse because, I mean, this has been one of the major complaints of the LDP since its inception. It is tied to big business. It is corrupt. It is money politics. It's dirty, with Mr. Tanaka Kakue running the construction ministry and getting kickbacks there. This has been going on for a long time, at least in the perception of many of the voting public. So it's just indicative. It is a chance to kind of enhance their standing and possibly kick the LDP out. So yeah, I think a lot of energy is being put into this. And when the LDP is in this way, there's very little that they can do to quell it. And even their coalition partner is saying, I'm sick of it. You guys had the opportunity to do it. You bypassed it because you love getting this money. And even if you have to have transparency, you just are addicted to it. And we have to be the adult in the room and tell you that it can't happen anymore. And you have to run your political machinery, your political party, the same way everybody else does. Either you need to sell a newspaper, or you need to get people contributing to you, or you need to do it by lifting your own bootstraps up. So if there is a turnaround in the government and the LDP loses that power, there will be a lot of changes in regulation and in policy and in foreign and diplomatic circles. So it's a very, very big deal.
right, it is a big deal indeed. And also, once again, we know that the opposition is always looking out for, let's say, well, scandals, some
Sure.
seeds of scandal, so that they can discredit the parties in power. And predominantly the LDP, of course, they don't care that much about Komeito, but the LDP is always in the center of their attention when it comes to trying to find something that would really stain the reputation of the party. Not that it is very clean at the moment, but still. And then at the same time, and we touched upon this before, Timothy, but once again, it seems to me that Mr. Noda has been too quiet. So everybody expected him to become more active and actually to create more movements probably after the election of the lower house, and that hasn't happened yet. And of course, many people say yes, he's a great politician, and he certainly is. But this silence has been quite long already, and I wonder what the reason for that is.
What you want to say is that his silence has been quite deafening.
Deafening. Okay. Yes. Well, that's a good way to put it. Yes.
Yes, but you could say the same thing about Mr. Kishida, couldn't you?
Right. Yes.
So this is politics. This is politics. It's a high stakes game. And probably with Mr. Noda, he understands that other people can do his bidding. He's got other opposition parties who are just as angry and want the LDP to fall as well. I think what's happening is this gap between the LDP and Ishin is beginning to close. And it seems like Ishin is the most viable party to get the budget passed and to join forces with the LDP. We don't know yet if it's just on an issue by issue basis. We'll join you just for passing the budget. So on March 2nd, you can pass it up to the upper house. If they pass it or fail it, who cares? It will come back to the lower house. We'll still pass it, and it will be the law of the land on April 1st, and then we can get on with the rest of the fighting. I don't know what that answer is yet, and we're closely following it. But it could be that we don't even have Mr. Ishiba as prime minister at that point in time. I mean, there's so much turmoil that's going on. But yes, people love to pick on the LDP. The other thing that's kind of interesting to point out is that Mr. Ishiba has been pretty scandal-free in his administration. Typically, when there's a new prime minister and a new cabinet, within maybe 60 days, somebody is found out to have been doing something before they became a minister of state, or they have a certain proclivity that is not meeting with the prime minister's expectation. Something comes up, or Bunshun writes a story, and he's been pretty free of that. If it does come up, and the timing could be really bad for the prime minister, it just hasn't yet. So, the cabinet that he has selected is very seasoned, and all of the names are names that we know. They're not any new faces in the cabinet. So maybe he'll skim by on that, but he's got other kind of scandals that he has to deal with, and promising the voters and promising his opposition that he is cleaning up the LDP. We're not going to be accepting funds, or at least if we accept the funds, there'll be transparency. We'll let you know who paid us and how it's being spent and that sort of thing.
Yes, and I also wonder, so he's visiting the United States, he's meeting President Trump next week. I wonder how that meeting would resonate here in Japan as well, and whether it will have any, let's say, impact on the ratings.
Huge.
Huge. You think
it's got to be huge. One of the three things that this prime minister must do is establish a working relationship with the president of the United States, whether it was Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. He must do that. And particularly with Trump, with him waving the stick of tariffs, it is sending shivers throughout the entire international community. What he did in Davos was shocking, and people are now paying great attention. So if the prime minister comes back, or if he performs well or poorly, that's going to have a significant impact. And if he comes back, I don't know. I expect that there will be positive announcements that are made, so that the president is seen as supporting Japan and seen as supporting the prime minister. But it could go the other way too.
Right, it could go the other way indeed. And because we all know that when Japanese prime ministers, they have difficulty here with their ratings in Japan, they go overseas.
Right.
Right, they do diplomatic tours and everything. So, but yes, we'll see.
This one's a little bit different. He didn't have the opportunity to visit with the president-elect before he became president. He missed that opportunity. Abe did show up and kind of lobbied a little bit. Would you please meet with the prime minister? I guess that was the message that she carried. And of course, he cordially agreed. And why wouldn't he agree? It's just a timing issue, especially with the fact that Mr. Ishiba is representing a minority government. He's not like Mr. Abe. He's not even like Mr. Kishida. And he lacks some of the diplomatic chops that both of those gentlemen had, and particularly with Mr. Abe. At least they had some bond of bromanship. Mr. Ishiba doesn't have any of that. So in a one-day meeting, it's not a state visit. Your expectations need to be tempered.
Well,
thanks, Greg.
Yes, thank you. I'm just going through the congratulatory.
Okay.
The notes here, and thank you to everybody who put a note there for us, a comment, and also
send money.
Okay. Once we build that link, right? Okay, so all right, and then the next question is once again going back to the scandal. It seems to be interesting to many people in and out of Japan, and then that question is, where is the scandal when there is no evidence shown of any quid pro quo, and when most budget decisions are taken by bureaucrats anyway? I think that this question actually talks about two different things, because we talk about the scandal of the political funds, and they are not related to the budget, while the budget, of course, it is built up by the people in Kasumigaseki and then approved diet. So these two issues are two different issues, but I wonder, would you like to touch upon them, Timothy, or?
Let me touch on it to just dispel some of the confusion that maybe the question indicates. So there is no quid pro quo for the amount of money that is being generated that the LDP collects and then distributes, and to the person they distribute it to, they don't report it, they just put it in their pocket. What that is they hold briefings. I go to these briefings all the time. Every week I'm at them. They usually cost ichimayen or nimayen, 10,000 or 20,000 yen, maybe $100 or $200 per plate. This happens all over the world. People are going to these briefings. It's a kind of, it's an entrance fee to listen to the briefing, to get insight and timely information directly from members of the parliament. And members who were having these speeches, they were personally giving their speeches, or within their faction, the faction said, look, you need to make sure that you get 20 people to show up. You have to have 20. And if you get 30, then that 10 that you extra got, we're going to give you a little bit of a kickback on that. Don't tell anybody. That's the issue. So there's no quid pro quo. If you get the 20 people, you've met your quota, and people are going to come in because they're going to see you at that briefing. They can say hi to you. They can bring their colleagues and say, this is the member of parliament I was telling you about. I'm friendly with, he knows my name, or with maybe even a minister of state. It is very valuable to participate in these briefings. It is worth paying the entry fee. So there's no quid pro quo there. With regard to the budget and the ministries and that sort of thing, as I said earlier, the budget committee meetings now are with the leaders of the various parties, talking to the LDP and talking with the cabinet and talking with the prime minister. What did you mean that you're going to increase spending in this particular area? Why are you doing that? How come it's being spent this way and not this way? So they question that. And that phase ends on Monday, and then on Wednesday, they go by individual ministries, and that goes on for another 15 or 20 days. But you've only got 28 days before they pass this budget. So throughout that period of time, today and tomorrow, we'll be talking about the finance ministry and the budget that the bureaucrats proposed to the LDP that have been presented to us. What do you guys think? The opposition parties, what do you think? And then they have this question and answer period that is televised. So people get a little bit of a feel for what's going on, how they're going to spend their money. Why is it different this year than it was last year? That sort of thing.
Right. Well, thank you for the clarification. And we've got one more comment, actually a question on LinkedIn, which I'm going to read out to you now.
Okay.
Has the Japanese Diet ever done a continuing resolution to keep funding the central government budget at last year's levels for a few months, as it is done in the United States?
No. The budget is, so constitutionally it is mandated that the budget must pass on April 1st. It's also constitutionally mandated that the upper house has 30 days to consider what the lower house has proposed to them. So it goes from the prime minister and the cabinet at the end of the year. Well, it starts earlier. The various ministries propose their budget allocations to the cabinet ministry, or to the chief cabinet ministry in the prime minister's office. By the end of the year, the cabinet pulls it together and they promote that budget for the next year's budget. Then they move into the diet session, the 150-day diet session that we're in now, constitutionally mandated. And by March 2nd, the lower house has to finish their deliberations there and then pass it to the upper house. And the upper house has 30 days to consider it. So it's not like we're going to go into a lull because the lower house has finished their deliberations and now it goes into the upper house for 30 days. There's still going to be plenty of controversy there. If the upper house does not pass it, as I said earlier, only with the budget, it goes back to the lower house. And if the lower house passed it originally, they'll probably pass it again, but there could be things that are going on where they decide not to pass it. And that hasn't happened, no.
Right. Okay, thank you very much for that as well. And it looks like we have gone through the questions and today, which also means that you will be free to, I guess, go to the sauna or something else, because you're not on your boat today.
I'm not on
Yes.
the good ship Grims, but
No,
I
not
am in day 7 of my 10-day detox. But thank you very much for reminding me, because I'm incredibly thirsty and hungry, and very grateful for spending 2 years, 4 years every Sunday with you, Maya, and with our terrific audience.
every Sunday morning. Make no mistake, I know how terrified you are. You make it very clear to everybody who listens and watches us. So
That's
I'm.
obvious.
It's obvious, yes, that terror in your eyes and on your
Yes.
every Sunday morning. Okay, so thank you very much for this, and to everybody who stayed with us. We are very happy to have you with us either Sunday morning or later along the week, whenever you have time to watch or listen to these briefings. Again, please remember that if you are in Tokyo or in Yokohama, maybe Osaka as well, in Japan as well, we're going to have a briefing about why it is important for your company, your business, your organization to know the ins and outs of lobbying here. It is going to happen on February the 13th at 5 o'clock. That is Thursday, the day before Valentine's Day, which in Japan is celebrated by girls giving chocolates to their boyfriends. So, yes. But anyway, this is something that we hope will help you, and are very looking forward to seeing you there.
And
Okay.
there will be a networking opportunity afterwards where we can have drinks and tapas at the Spain Club. That's just almost next door to where the venue is, where we're going to have the briefing. So a great opportunity to talk with people, but seating is limited, isn't it, Maya?
Seating is limited, so if you have time from 5 o'clock on Thursday, that is
Come on.
February the 13th, please join us. And yes, reserve your seat.
Thanks,
Okay,
Diane.
so thank you again. Another shout out to our wonderful sponsors now, with which we are going to close this briefing. To everybody, have a great Sunday and a bright new week. See you next
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.